All right, Project Herpetoculture. Welcome, everybody. This is episode 7 with the always enigmatic and charismatic Eddie Soto. Hey, thanks for coming on board, Eddie.
Anytime.
Quick mention of our host network, which is Animals at Home. Thanks, Dylan. You're the king. You're the goat. You're the dude. And then also we have to mention our we have a sponsor. It's Custom Reptile Habitats, right, Roy?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and we have an affiliate link in the show description and in the show notes. And if you go to Custom Reptile Habitats and you buy anything from them through that affiliate link, we get a little kickback. So that would be epic if anybody wants to do that. But I just want to go ahead and hop right in, and because Eddie is an excellent herper, killer dude, good buddy. So for the first thing I wanted to ask you is, for folks or listeners who might not know or might not be familiar with you or might not be aware of what you're up to, can you share a little bit about the breadth of experience and species and things that you're working on, sort of a broad overview of what you do and how you've been doing it?
Yeah, so I've been an animal guy or a reptile guy since I was a kid. It all started with, Godzilla.
Yeah.
So I was never into dinosaurs. I hate dinosaurs, actually, just because.
What?
Wait, hold on. The only reason I hate dinosaurs is because they were around way before us. We have no idea what the fuck they look like. So I don't like that we say this is what they look like. So it really bothers me. I don't want to have a toy of a dinosaur when it probably doesn't look like that at all. Godzilla's not real. He can look however the fuck I want him to look like.
This podcast is over. Yeah. It's over, dude. I can't.
We're gonna have to edit all this out. Charlie, you got this.
I think dinosaurs had a lot more feathers. I don't know. That's a whole nother tangent. But anyway, so as far as breeding, I've been breeding officially since 2007, but I've been keeping since I was 10 years old. Okay. I'm 35 now, I think 35 or so. No, I'm 35. So yeah, and my whole thing now is I breed a lot of I guess what people would say, the rarer species. Mm-hmm. I do also breed a lot of the common stuff at pet trade. I do a lot of expos, a lot of shows. So the common stuff actually pays a lot of the bills, whereas the rarer stuff is for my enjoyment. Mm-hmm. Plus, there's a huge market for that as well. Yeah. But yeah, my whole thing is I like the rare stuff. And it's funny because I'll post, people will see a commonly imported animal and it's no big deal for them. But the moment you post a picture of it breeding or it actually hatching in captivity, people flip their minds out, and I like. So yeah,
that's interesting.
Probably didn't answer any question at all, but there you go.
No, that's perfect. So wait, so give me an example. So like, give me an example of something that's commonly imported that you hatched and posted a picture and people were bugging out about it.
Okay, so for instance, like the conehead lizard.
Yeah.
People would see pictures of those being imported. I get messages all the time of people like, "Oh, those were $7. You got them. They died." But the moment I, post a picture of them breeding and laying and hatching and all of this, then people are like, "What the hell? This is crazy." Yeah. Same thing with Eric Haycraft with the what is it? The Chrysatus. Mm-hmm. Those are an animal that are imported by the hundreds, and they're as far as the price tag, they're not that valuable, but if you produce one in captivity, it's like, oh, cool. Wow. Holy crap. Like, that's amazing. That's another, another example.
Why do you think that is? What do you think makes people?
So people just think it's like they think it's renewable. They don't worry about it. So like, oh, why would we breed this when it's going to come into the country forever? When that's not the case. I haven't seen, it's happened, but wild caught serrated coneheads haven't come to the country in a while, especially in droves. That hasn't happened in forever. Okay. If you do get them, they're maybe less than a dozen or so. But certain species, you never know what's going to be here today, gone tomorrow. Sure. Russian tortoises, you never know. Russian tortoises are almost worthless as far as like the pet trade goes. But what's going to happen in 20 years when they're no longer around? They're going to fetch a huge price tag, captive bred.
Right. So, right. That's a good point. So among that scope of things that you mess with, are there any projects in your facility that you're especially excited about? Stuff that just really like you're jazzed up about it, or some stuff that maybe people wouldn't know that you're messing with?
So right now I'm tinkering with a lot of like cooler temperature animals. So like the angle-headed lizard. It's what's the scientific name of that one? Gonocephalus grandis.
Yeah.
And the other one is the regular great anglehead lizard. And I'm actually doing a lot of this stuff outside here in Florida, and it's working. I've gotten eggs. The downside is a lot of this stuff takes forever to incubate. So I'm like 100 days now in some of these eggs. And again, these are all animals that were like inexpensive, $40 a piece.
Yeah.
You know, and I post pictures of them laying eggs, and I get tons of messages in my inbox like, "Oh, I want a baby. I want a baby. It's amazing."
Interesting.
All right.
Do you think that's like because people maybe assume that with the import, like it's going to be too much effort, it's going to be too difficult, it's going to be too challenging, and then with something captive bred, maybe they'll have an easier time with it, or do you think?
Absolutely. There's for them,
I think
there's no
that's
point of even trying to interact with it as far as breeding. It's
Yeah.
always around. And as far as like a breeder, like trying to make a living off of those type of animals, which I don't, those are for my enjoyment, those projects, because the amount that I put into it, someone can buy one wild caught for $40 a piece, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not charging $40 a piece for something like that. I'm either keeping it or selling it at a high price tag. And I've already gotten a bunch of people asking me to sell these animals to them.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's pretty good. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would prefer that people also get psyched on an import, you know what I mean? At least to make sure that the animal isn't mistreated or something like that. But at the same time, it's kind of cool that there is a certain level of psych for something that is relatively common, that is, or maybe not common's not the right word, but like, let's say somewhat frequently imported, or doesn't fetch a high price, or whatever however you want to say that. I think it's cool that there are people who get super psyched and want to tackle or get in on a project that's common or what have you. Right?
I think that's just kind of what it takes to get a lot of those species actually established, you know, is somebody actually taking the time, you know, and ultimately in a lot of cases taking the losses to figure them out. You know, I think that's something that a lot of people have reflected back to me about the Polycris, is just that like no one's really been able to get those to go, you know, and
I failed with them.
I mean, the imports are just, they will do well for a while, and then a lot of people will say that they just crash. And for whatever reason, I got lucky with mine, and they didn't do that. They didn't crash. And you know, but that's like, we need 10 more people now at least to do the same thing, you know, and figure them out. Otherwise, because that's what it takes.
We need 10 more Roys.
Get them established, you know.
I mean,
but that's like so cool. It's the same thing with all these amazing Asian agamids, you know, that you're talking about, like the gonocephalus and the acanthosaura, and all these amazing dragon-like lizards that people just take for granted. But also at the same time, you look at them and they're incredible to look at, beautiful lizards.
Oh yeah.
But everyone's terrified of them because everyone's just heard the horror stories.
Right.
It just takes one person to actually do the work, figure them out, get some babies going. And
and you touch on a good point. I mean, there is a lot of loss when you're getting all these wild caught animals. I mean, a lot of loss. In order to get a good project going, you need a minimum of 10 animals of the same species to really have an actual project, or an actual, you know, situation where you're going to produce a bunch, because you have to expect loss. You also have to hope that you get, you know, mixed sexes, but
right.
I mean, if you only get a pair or something, you're pretty much screwed already.
Yeah, totally.
You know, Eric echoed that when on the show we did with him. He mentioned a couple of times needing, you know, a substantial number of animals to just to set up the beginning of any project at all. And this is something that I feel like it's been kind of like a recurring theme, at least in my day-to-day over the last several months, is like talking with various herpers about the challenges of setting up a project, you know, because people will buy a pair or even a single animal and say, all right, this is the start of my project. And it's like, okay, you're like one, you know, you're like 1/10, 1/20th of the way there. But as soon as you start expanding the scope of that project, you know, I feel like when somebody says, oh, I got a new project, they're going to try it out for 6 months to a year, see if it works. And then if they don't get eggs right away, they scrap the project. Right. And then maybe you get the rare few who take it a step further. Maybe they breed something once and then they decide, all right, well, this wasn't really as interesting as I thought it was, scrap the project. And okay, like, fair enough. I understand that, you know, I've done it a number of times myself. Sometimes an animal just doesn't hit you, or whatever you're working on doesn't strike you the way it should. And it's like, all right, maybe they don't fit in here. Maybe they don't, you know, whatever it may be. And you need to be able to make the decision to move on responsibly. So, but then you get the other folks who say, all right, I'm going to take this to the next level. And it's an even smaller number of people who breed those animals more than once, yet smaller pool of people who breed second generation of those animals, and an even smaller pool of people who take it past more than one generation of breeding. And you know, so maybe this isn't like a specific question, but you know, if you could ruminate on, or just sort of elaborate on some of the stuff that you think about in terms of, you know, how do you evaluate a project's viability for you? How do you evaluate whether or not the project is engaging enough for you to stick with it and see it out? What are some considerations that you have for a project that you want to take into the long term, right? Because these are complicated questions, and I'm not sure everybody thinks about them that often.
So first off, it has to appeal to me. I have to visually look at it and enjoy it. Second, am I able to actually care for this animal? Do I have the means to do it? So, for instance, if it's like a super desert animal, that answer is obviously no right away. But
no euros,
a lot of the stuff no euros. I have no euros. Although my reptile building is a very dry building, so
soon enough,
soon I'll hit you up. So for like a lot of that Asian, I heard he's a good guy, maybe. So for a lot of that Asian Agama stuff, they're beautiful. They have crazy colors. Most of them, if not all of them, are mostly sexual dimorphic. So like the females can be somewhat plain, and then the males are like these extravagant colors. Mm-hmm. The downside is a lot of them are cooler animals, so I have to figure that out. And then, you know, I don't really care if there's going to be a market. I just want to see them here, because once they're gone, I don't know when they're going to come back. So I just want to enjoy them for myself. The second thing that I think about, or the last thing I think about, is, do people want to buy these? That's the last thing I think about. I just want to get them established in my own collection, and I want to enjoy them for myself.
Yeah.
The latter comes years later, when there actually are people harassing you for babies.
Right.
So like, for instance, like the coneheads, Leomactus serratus, I started off with just a trio. And I didn't even know they were a trio. I didn't know how to sex them at the time. I saw them in books. I'd seen them in person maybe one time. I had the opportunity to get them, and they were super well caught. They looked terrible. It's a skinny animal. It's a skinny animal regardless, but when it's going through that import process and then coming in, you do all that, and it's even worse.
Yeah.
It looks like a little nasty little skinny Ethiopian kid. Yeah, you might have to edit that. But it's extremely dehydrated, and you know, you never know if it's going to live. So luckily I was breeding in golden pythons at the time, and the person that I didn't want to spend the money on this emaciated trio, so I did the trade. I got them, and luckily they were doing well. They started eating. And here's the cool thing about a lot of these animals that I work with: there's no captive information on them, zero. So you're literally finding the place where they come from. You're going on your phone. You're looking at the temperatures. You're looking at the times of years and the temperatures of all this, and you're trying to dial it in and plug it in.
Cool.
There was, and I'm not saying I did it first, because I definitely did not. There was other breeders way before me. They just eventually all got out of them, and then they just kind of disappeared for a little bit. And the only actual person who wrote to me, who actually answered me, was Frank Payne. He was the first person to actually respond to me. This was 2015, 16. I have no idea. He was the only one who was like, okay, that's a male, those are females. And I was like, okay, cool. To me, they all look the same. They looked all the same. So with that species, the males small, females are big.
Mhm.
And then obviously you can see some bulges and all that. Then I got lucky that they actually bred. So, okay, cool. I really didn't think of project at the moment. I was like, okay, cool, that's more for me, because I didn't think I'd get more. And then the second year, I got more. And I was like, okay, this wasn't a fluke. And not only did I get more, but she laid or both females laid multiple clutches for me that year. And then I started getting people messaging me. And then I was like, okay, maybe I have something here. And then also I had other people who bought wild caught babies from years ago. I'm assuming from the same import that I got. And they're like, hey, I have this lone male or lone female or whatever. And then they offered it to me. And I actually ended up building a decent sized collection, multiple bloodlines. So I just, like I said, I got lucky in that aspect.
Like, what are some things then that will make you say, all right, I'm cutting ties here. Like this, this project or this particular group of animals, isn't working out. What are some of the things that might cause you to make that choice and move on from something?
I'll give you another example. There's a certain species of lizard that our buddy here breeds, Mr. Roy, that I cut ties with, and I won't get again unless I buy them from him. Because I had that species. We're talking about the monkey lizards. I had them for maybe 6 months, less than a year, a decent amount, honestly. They actually came in pretty well. They were eating off the bat. I had them indoors, outdoors. They all did really well, but then they all just dropped on me. And everything I read, people were going through the same thing. I spoke to Roy on the phone. That was happening, not to him in particular, but that was what was going around a lot of people. And I said, screw it. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it the right way. This species is way more delicate than most species that I'm working with currently. Let someone else breed it as far as creating like F1s, F2s, all that jazz. And then I'll spend more money purchasing those animals for myself, not a $40 wild caught lizard from, wherever I got them from.
For sure. So then there seems to be some element of like, almost like Wild West involved in, or like pioneering in some regard, where if there's an animal that comes in and nobody's written a care guide on them, there's not some cover on them and cover story about them in Reptiles magazine, there's not some, you can't find a book, there's nobody on YouTube talking about them, and you have to go find and hunt down all that information. That sounds exciting. I mean, it was obviously pretty high risk, which would suggest why you need to have so many animals of a given project to ensure that that can go on forever. But so it's a two-part question in this case. The first is you mentioned that some of these species require some cooler temperatures. So are you what are you doing to accommodate that requirement? And then the second part is, other than what are some of the investigative tools you're using to get to the bottom of how to set them up? What are some of the ways you're problem solving to find that out?
Okay, so a lot of those cooler species, obviously I live in Central Florida, so it's hot. Direct sunlight pretty much everywhere. But behind my building, there's no sun, just a lot of cover. So all those cages are on that side of the building where there is sun, it's very filtered. So I have all these giant Reptibreeze type cages, and it's filled with plants. So it's not only is it filtered from the outside, but it's filtered from the inside. So if you take a temp gun, it's always going to be 20 degrees cooler in that cage than it is wherever there's direct sunlight. Now, there are places for them to bask, and they actually do use it. Actually, every single species will bask in the morning in direct sunlight. After that, they're hidden completely. Also, those type of species, all of them are extremely they get dehydrated very quickly. So on all the tops of every section of where I keep my animals, there's soaker hoses on every section of cages that I have. So all I got to do is just turn on a hose, and I just let it rain for like an hour or two. Just heavy rain, nonstop rain, especially when they're like first brought into the country. I mean, these things are just doused in water. so far I'm doing good. I've lost a few animals, but that was like literally the first few days. But so far, every species I've gotten eggs from.
That's excellent.
And
That
you
is
know,
awesome.
with very minimal loss, extreme minimal. The downside is every species I have is like 100+ incubation, so I'm not used to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's
it's
awesome.
all room temperature, so you have to think like breeding crested geckos, like that type of temperature. So and the thing is, the other part of the question is, how do I set that up, or how do I learn from that? I literally go on Google, I'm typing up the species. There's really no information. I think the website's called like the Red List, and it tells you like it basically gives you like coordinates of, you know, where they're from, the city, temperature, all of that stuff, and then I just go from there. And then if I can find anything as far as breeding, then I really go into a deep dive of who did it, how can I contact them, what information can I get for myself, what are they doing differently. But a lot of that stuff, like you said, at the Wild Wild West, it's exciting because you kind of figure it out for yourself, as long as you're not putting harm to that animal. You know, you want to do it to the best of it. So far, everything's doing well. They're all eating, so I'm not harming anything. But if someone can tell me more about a lot of the species, I'd love to hear it. Now, here's the cool thing: I found a lot of these. So every species I have of these agamas, there's someone who has bred them. So I'm picking their brains all the time. A lot of them are very, you know, they're very secretive, so they don't want to talk too much, but they're talking to me. So a lot, and every single one of them was like, "Don't put them outside. Don't put them outside." Every species is outside, and they're doing phenomenal right now.
Nice.
So we'll see. We'll see.
I think that hydration piece that you're talking about is so critical with those guys. From like everyone I know who has had any modicum of success with those lizards, it's just been like wet. You got to keep them like, you got to give them water all the time, and that just stresses me out thinking about that. Especially keeping indoors, trying to cycle that much water
and
through the setups.
I don't do any misting systems. I don't do anything automatic. I do everything by hand. And if you listen to like old podcasts with Ron St. Pierre, he's talked about this, where the reason why he doesn't do that is so that way he can literally interact with every single cage, and he can see what's going on, because you can learn a lot just by just staring at an animal. It might be creepy for the animal, but just watching what they do in those habitats, you're learning from them. So I sit there and I missed every single animal, and I'm watching. And when I have the soaker hoses on everything, I'm outside watching everything. And it's funny because they know when I do it too. So now they've been around a long time in my yard now, so they know the whole deal. They know when I'm going to do it, because I have multiple soaker hoses. So when they see me disconnect, and they know where the best spot is to lap up water. It's really interesting.
Love that.
I'd love to get it. I would love to record it, but the moment I put anything near them, they bolt.
Of course.
So like so like I have to like hide it, and then if I hide my phone, then the sun hits it too much or something. It warms up too much. You know, it takes forever. But I make sure that I have a good source. I can watch every animal while they're getting hydrated. Again, if I get too lazy with a automatic mister, I get too lazy and it's on. It's 3 o'clock. Okay, it's probably on. I don't have to look. And the next thing you know, and I'm not saying this is happening because I've never had an automatic mister ever, but you know, people who rely too much on it, maybe they never check, and this animal's been dead for a while or whatever. I don't know. I personally, whether it's a little hand sprayer, or you know, the heavy duty one, or my soaker hoses, or the hose with the little nozzle, you know, I do that all myself.
That's great. I feel like there's definitely there is a kind of a dividing line between one or two types of herpers. Is like, there's the folks who heavily automate and are extra meticulous and have, you know, programmed timers and everything, and that's awesome. Like in fact, in some way, I'm a little bit jealous of folks who have the sort of the cognitive patience and wherewithal for that, because it just doesn't suit my stylistic tendencies and my preferences. So I'm the same way, Eddie. Like I'm much more, I want to do everything. In fact, like I have timers. Yeah, I use a few timers, but for the most part, I even go through, I'll even switch off lights by hand, you know, just kind of manually half the time, because I like, I don't know. I just like kind of being involved in that process. I like being able to change it and having fluctuations and not having it be exact every day. there's like a nice balance between routine and consistency and impulsive sporadicness, you know. I kind of, both of those things I find quite fun.
I relate to that.
Yeah. What about food? So if again, if it's a Wild West type thing and there's, you know, not a ton of information, you know, I know Eric was talking about it in his episode, kind of discovering accidentally that some of his stuff was going nuts for crayfish and just absolutely bonkers for crayfish. And that seems not just fun and exciting and rewarding, but also terrifying to a certain extent, you know. Like I could imagine, you know, being the first guy who figured out that a firefly will kill a bearded dragon. Like, well, shit, you know. Like, damn it, you know. So how do you approach that? Is there any method to that part of it?
So unfortunately, not really.
Okay.
It's whatever I have available, which unfortunately is going to be the standard cricket or the discoid roach. But grasshoppers seem to be the crack for a lot of this wild caught stuff. That really gets a lot of stuff going. And see what other people are doing. What are other people offering their animals? Like, for instance, you saw the video I posted today of me feeding the cherry to the anoles.
Yeah.
For years, I heard Ron talk about anoles eat cherries. I didn't believe him. I thought he was crazy. But these things go crazy for cherries. They go crazy for fruit. I would have never known that, you know, until I visually saw it when I was there. He'll feed them a full banana and they'll destroy it. They'll attack it.
So wild.
But it's all about, again, researching where they're from, what animals are there, and what animals am I able to offer that will kind of fill in that gap. And for certain species, a lot of people, you know, crickets aren't the thing that a lot of these animals will eat. Crickets are a nocturnal animal. Most of the stuff I work with and what most people work with as far as lizards go, they're diurnal. They're not nocturnal. They're not eating crickets. They're eating caterpillars. They're eating grasshoppers. They're eating everything but crickets. Because when the animals are sleeping, the crickets are awake, running around. So that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize.
That's a good point. That's Roy. So I feel like I've just been bulldozing past you with questions. I want to make sure.
No, this is great.
Lots of time, you know.
No, it's good. It's good. I mean, there's a million things I could ask. But one thing I'm actually curious though about is, so I kind of think of you as like one of the dons in the lizard mafia, you know, and but I'm curious,
I don't know about that.
But is it, I mean, I know you're pretty heavily focused on lizards, but I know you also have some tortoises that you really love, and I know you've kept snakes in the past, but are you working with any snakes right now, or is it like mostly lizards that you're focused on?
It's pretty much, as far as breeding what pays my bills, it's primarily the lizard stuff. I actually started, as far as breeding animals, I actually started with snakes. First animal I ever bred were snakes. I bred snakes from 2007 until 2011 or 12. Various species, obviously the ball python, but I also did a lot of the dwarf species, so like the children's pythons, spotted pythons. I did some colubrids. The Angolan python was my favorite. If I could have just one species of snake to work with, it would be the Angolan python. I love that species. So the fact that I bred them, I'm content that I did it. It's not a rare animal by any means. I mean, kind of, I guess. But as far as snakes go, they're just not my jam anymore. I love them. I respect them. I love that market. But as far as what works for me, it's the lizards. I need to see interaction. I need to, you know, honestly, it would be way easier for snakes, like with me with snakes, because like, for instance, I went to the expo, Daytona Expo. I was gone for 4 days. Lizards aren't like snakes where you can just say, peace out, I'll see you later. Lizards need almost daily food. So that was flipping me out. But yeah, no, it's primarily the lizards. I do breed a lot of redfoot tortoises. I mean, that kind of pays some bills, but that's for my own enjoyment. At the end of the day, if I could have just the one animal, it'd always be my Aldabra. That's my baby. I love tortoises. I kept and bred like the Chinese box turtle. I just actually recently sold that group, but that was a species I loved. Pretty much every reptile I love. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff I have here that obviously I'm not going to breed my Aldabra. I'll be 60 years old by the time that thing's even mature. But, that's my baby. In fact, it's the only one that has a name. Everything else is just Lizard 1, Lizard 2, Lizard, yeah. But it's, unless it has like some weird defect, nothing has a name here. But yeah,
Interesting, yeah.
I kind of have, I pretty much bred, snake, lizard, tortoise. I've done all that.
It's interesting to me because I feel like that kind of progression that you're describing of kind of starting with snakes and then migrating toward lizards is something that I've observed a lot in
Yeah.
herpetoculture, and I think that I've done that to some degree. I mean, I've always kind of had a little bit of everything. I really like the diversity thing, but more and more it seems like lizards are really what I seem to be moving toward. And like most of like the future projects that I consider, like there's a couple select snakes that I would love to work with someday, but it's mostly like I'm thinking about lizards. And so yeah, I'm curious like what it is about that. I mean, you spoke to like the lizards are like more interactive, and I think that that's a lot of it about that for me too. But I'm curious if that's something you have also observed. And the other thing I'm curious about is just I want to hear more about this Aldabra, because I know it's like your baby, it's like your kid.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing animal. So I just want to hear a little bit about that guy.
All right. So as far as the lizards, so again, snakes are great. I'm not putting anything away from snakes. I love them.
Yeah.
But a snake is a snake. It couldn't care less about you. It just
Yeah.
wants its food. It wants a shelter. It wants water. That's the end. But the lizards, even if they're terrified of you from the get-go, most of them realize that you're not a threat. You're a food source. No lizard loves you. So let's get that out of there.
You've never met Pork Chop, I said.
Pork Chop really loves Phil's toes.
Yeah, he does.
Nice. Well, I've heard. But like even the most wild-caught animal eventually learns your routine, or the routine that goes on, as long as you have a routine. So like for instance, I just got, I breed Australian water dragons as well. I just acquired an unrelated group to mine.
Nice.
And
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I have too many water dragons now. It's fine. But they see me with a cup to feed them, and they go crazy. They see me, they're running to the thing, and they're running back and forth. They're all excited like a dog. And I enjoy that. Even some of the wild caught stuff, give it a year or so, and they know when I'm going to feed them. They get excited. I like that. Where the snake just sits there. I mean, obviously, sometimes when you open their enclosure, they know that it's feeding time, or they know that they're going to get food. I'm not saying they're not intelligent, because they are. It's just a different intelligence.
Yeah.
So I like that. As far as the Aldabra, my dream was to always have a giant tortoise. Always. So for me, it was always the Galapagos tortoise. I always wanted a Galapagos tortoise, until I interacted with a Galap and an Aldabra. And the Galap is a little bit more easygoing. It really doesn't interact with it too much. And again, there are some that do, but the Aldabra, once I actually interacted with an actual Aldabra, I was like, this is the animal I want. This is, one day I'll have this giant animal in my yard. So for years, I was always, as a joke, and this is something I've always wanted since I was a kid. Never thought it was possible. I didn't know you could actually own these animals.
Yeah.
And another side tangent, I didn't even know there was an industry for reptiles. I had no idea there was I had no clue that I could be doing this as a living at all. I didn't know this existed. So this is insane of where I'm at right now. But so the inside joke was, for years, I would tell my wife, she would say, what do you want for Christmas, or what do you want for your birthday? Whenever that topic popped up, I would always say, I want an Aldabra. And it was always a joke, cool. And I would never get an Aldabra. It was just a joke, because it's an expensive animal. So fast forward of years and years, and 10 plus years of me saying, I want an Aldabra. One day she says, all right, get your fucking Aldabra. I'm tired of hearing you say this. Just get it. So here's the catch. She's not in the reptile world. She has no clue how to do any of that. So she's like, you find it, you find the person, then you send me that info. Come on. We all know a guy who knows a guy. We all know somebody in whatever place that they work at. So obviously, if I need uromatics, I'm going to Phil. Or, you know, there's always, you know, who to go to for certain things. So as soon as she said that, I knew who to contact immediately. So I contacted Sam Spagucci. I'm probably saying his last name wrong. Huge Aldabra guy here in Florida. Contacted him right away, like not even an hour later. And for Christmas, I got my Aldabra.
That's
And
awesome.
a little thing was in the palm of my hand. This is 2018. It fit in the palm of my hand. It absolutely hated me. It despised me until like last year. And now it actually sticks it broke my heart too, because it's like, you know, you see all the videos of like the neck stretching out, people are scratching the neck, and it's, you know, all of that. And all the things that I criticize other people with like bearded dragons doing, I was like, I want this thing to love me. And then last year, I think it was last year, one day, I was scratching it and it just stuck its neck out. And I was like, oh shit, are we like best friends now? And I was like scratching the neck and it let me, and I pulled my phone out because with you know, with that type of tortoise, you got to do everything slowly. If you do everything suddenly, then it shoves its head back in, and it, you know, it's a bad experience for that animal. So you do everything slowly, and now if I come outside, it comes right out, and it knows when it's going to get fed. If it sees me, especially me, if it sees anyone else, it kind of is a little bit more leery. But if it sees me, it comes up to me now. It expects food, and if I'm lucky, I can, you know, scratch his neck. So
I love it.
And
So
one of the reasons, and the thing about Aldabras too, the cool thing about Aldabras, and Sam says this in an interview he's done before, where Galapagos tortoises are more like dogs. No, Galapagos tortoises are more like cats, and Aldabras are more like dogs.
Oh.
So Galaps are more antisocial. They really don't want to be with another Galap at all. Where Aldabras are more social. They actually interact with each other. They actually enjoy the company of other Aldabras. So when I first got my Aldabra, he was by himself, just secluded by himself. So whenever I showed up, it was all scared. It couldn't eat around me. Like I had to put food down and then hide. And then through the window, I'm watching it and it's eating. But at the moment I would walk by, it would run away. So I contacted Sam and I was like, hey man, this Aldabra it just hates me. Like this is a year later, it hates me. And what can I do? Yeah, what am I gonna do? My feelings are being hurt here. So he was like, hey, what other tortoises do you keep? I was like, hey, I have a giant herd of redfoots. He's like, okay. He's like, the redfoots love you? Like they, you know, not love you, but they, you know, they come to you when you feed them and all that. I said, yeah, they follow me everywhere. So he's like, put your Aldabra with your redfoots, as long as they're somewhat decent sizes to each other, and then just let it happen. And honestly, it was like almost a night and day. The Aldabra follows the redfoots, and then the redfoots follow me. So eventually the Aldabra learned that I was the food source. He wouldn't freak out when I showed up.
Wow.
It was all a food reward and all of this. And then the poor Aldabra, like he doesn't know that the redfoots don't give a crap about him. So he'll try to he'll stick his head out and like put it against like the other with the redfoots, and they're just like, leave me alone, I hate you. And they were not all about that. But over time of me going in there and interacting with the redfoots and the redfoots following me, the Aldabra started to do that. So that helped out a lot.
That's so
so that's just
cool.
Again, that's my pet. His name is Jupiter.
Jupiter. That's a great
name. His name is Jupiter.
Yes.
And
love it.
I spent like 3 hours looking at a bunch of 6-month-old Aldabras, picking out the one that I wanted.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to tortoises, I'm all about like the high dome. I'm all about making it look like a perfect circle.
Okay.
And not all Aldabras are, you know, they're not all the same. So you get some more Aldabras that are some, you know, just like Galops, you see them, some are more like flatter shelled or high dome shelled. Sure. Same thing with the Aldabras. So I sat there for like an hour or 3 hours. No, this poor man was just like waiting for me to pick out my fucking tortoise. And I'm just sitting there looking at them, and then I put 4 together and just look at them and see what they do.
Yeah.
And the one that I picked would actually come up to me and it would eat food around me, and then I bring it home and it hated me. But yeah, so if you look at it now, it's almost a perfect shell. So Jupiter, largest planet in our solar system.
Got it.
So it kind of fits.
I love it.
And
yeah, it's perfect.
yeah. Again, it's one of the few animals that has a name. And it's if I had to pick one animal, like if I was done breeding animals and I had just one animal, it would be that one.
That's
And
So cool.
again, I'm lucky to live in a property that's, has the space to provide his needs, so I don't have to worry about anything as far as what's going to happen when he's 500 plus pounds.
So whether you're working with a tortoise or your significant other, persistence pays off.
Yeah, just annoy them.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. So we just had a conversation with Armin Kulian a few days ago, and he mentioned the same. He actually had a similar sentiment about his croc monitor. He said, if I ever had to get out of all of this for whatever reason, this is the croc monitor. He's the one that I would have the hardest time moving on from. It's funny. It's so interesting how some animals just capture you for one reason or another. Like, so personally, my dream reptile that is just not really in the cards for me is a Fiji iguana, and I don't care what kind, but preferably the crested. The Fiji crested's my favorite. Fiji banded is beautiful. I know there's a lot of subdivisions in there, so but
I 100% agree with you.
And not like I'd be picky, like if somebody was like, I got this Fiji, but it's I don't know, but even within the same species. So I recently got a bunch of there was an import of ornates that came in not long ago, and I picked up a few animals. I have some youngsters and some adults from that shipment, and I generally try to kind of take like a hard line and not bring in adult imports because they're the hardest ones to get acclimated and get going. But I didn't really have much of a choice this time, so I got half of them were juveniles, half of them are adults, and there's one. They're all awesome. Every one of them are great reptiles. I love each Euro quite profoundly, but there's one in particular. She is just an absolute sweetheart, dude. She came in rail thin, just like rail thin, and so jacked up and full of parasites and everything. So I got her medicated. I got her going, and it took her a few days, but she got kicking and she got eating, and it's only been like 2-3 months and she's already figured out food guy. And so she comes ripping over every time I walk by her pen because she knows I'm going to drop stuff. And she's as friendly as can be. She's so relaxed and she's such a sweet little, oh my God. But right before the show, I was holding her and taking her out. And it's not often that I take the time to pull one of the trillion ornates here and just hold it. Just because, and she just really got me. I gotta come up with a name for her, but I gotta get that Fiji though. That's the one thing. One of these days, I'll find a way. I don't care if I have to found a zoo to make it legitimate. I'm gonna get a goddamn Fiji.
Okay. As long as you said legitimate, we're good.
Yeah, legitimate. Oh yeah, no, sure. Like I'm not going to prison for a Fiji, but I mean maybe I would. I don't know. But
you can move to Canada.
I could move to Canada, but I
believe they have the access to have.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm hoping is that maybe someday, for some reason, some law will change because it's like, well, everybody else has them. Fuck it, you can have some. But that's a pipe dream. That's never gonna happen.
There's always like loopholes. Like I got a story for you. So I keep the Cuban rock iguana.
Yeah.
So I've always loved Cuban rocks. Never had them at one point. So a few years ago, again, everyone knows me as the reptile guy in my little community that's not into reptiles. I'm the strange lizard reptile guy, all that stuff. Same. So if there's any, I'm the guy who I'm sure you have people who send you pictures of lizards like, what's this and what's that?
Yeah.
So I had some friends that work at a pet store, like a PetSmart. And he sent me a picture. He's like, hey man, this guy has a picture of this lizard. He wants to know if you want it. And then right away I'm like, no. He's like, he thinks it's an iguana, but it's really ugly. And I'm like, all right, whatever. Send me a picture. And I'm looking at it, and it's a cyclura. It's a Cuban rock iguana. And I'm like, what the hell? So I'm like, okay, what's this guy's phone number? So I call the guy. The thing is, this man works for a shipping company.
Oh,
wow.
And at the time, he was receiving these giant cargo shipments from Guantanamo Bay in Cuba.
Oh.
And he's like, hey, this lizard was in this container for like 3 weeks and I have it. And he's like, it's really ugly. And it was a little baby. It was a little baby. He's like, this thing is ugly. And I'm like, all right. And now I'm trying to play it like, okay, what does this guy want? And I was like, he's like, what do you got? He's a Southern guy, real Southern redneck guy. And I'm like, well, I got like $30. He's like, deal.
Oh, dude.
So in my head, I'm like, is this happening? Like, what is happening right now? Is this FWC? Like, is this a sting operation? Like, what is happening?
For sure.
And sure as shit, I go to this man's house. He has a extremely angry, emaciated Cuban rock.
Oh.
So give him $30. Got the lizard. Exchange phone numbers because he told me that there's a lot of weird stuff that just comes in these shipments because apparently when they have the cargo actually in Cuba, they leave the doors open or some, a lot of things come in and out of those containers. So he'll tell me like a bunch of little lizards and all this would just be in there, and they would unload it because they were putting supplies and equipment inside them, and they would just leave it open for days.
Yeah.
And and it's warm, obviously, so they would just find all these animals. Most of the time they were dead, unfortunately, but sometimes they were alive.
Yeah.
And he would just tell me they would just bolt and they would just run and they were gone forever. But every now and then he would actually be able to catch them. So 4 months later, he calls me again.
Oh,
he's like, we got another one. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so we make up a plan. I go over there. He messages me right away, like, hey, it ran away. It's gone. And I'm like, oh, crap, fuck. All right. 3 months later, he sends me a picture. They found it in one of those those rat traps.
Oh,
those little black plastic rat traps with like the rat poison inside. It was inside it. The pest guy of where the building is, he just opened it to refill it, and he found the lizard.
Whoa.
And he's like, this one's a little bit bigger. He's like, and I was like, oh, what do you want for this one? He's like, I don't know. What do you got? And I'm like, I just do groceries. And I was like, I got a 6-pack of Miller Lite. He's like, deal.
Yeah. God damn it, dude.
No, this is real. I'm not making this up. He's like, deal. So I go and I get it. The first one was a male. The second one was a female.
Bullshit, dude.
Oh my God.
Bullshit.
No, I have pictures and everything.
God damn.
So
this is a fabrication.
I give him the beer, which I really wanted, but sacrifices. And I'm and at the time I didn't know Ron St. Pierre like the way I do now. This is 2015 maybe. So I knew him from the show, so I would occasionally talk to him, and he was like, what the hell? Like, that's amazing. So I was like, hey, do you know the legalities of this? He's like, fuck no. And I was like, I had these animals and low key, I kind of want to show them off that I have them. And this is such a cool story. So I actually got in contact with the Fish and Wildlife guy. And from what he told me, there was really no proof. There's no definitive proof that this came from Cuba. It's all hearsay.
Okay.
So I was allowed to keep them.
Wow.
So they're actually with my buddy right now. He has them, and we're actually incubating eggs right now from them.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Dude,
Amazing.
I love Cuban rocks. So I think
They're amazing.
We'll be chatting.
Yeah.
It
was such a crazy. And then he contacted me like a year after all of this, and he's like, I have another one, and I'm like, oh, cool. I'll take all you got. And at the time I told him, I said, hey, I don't care what lizard it is. I don't care how small it is. I don't care what it looks like. Whatever you have, message me. And so he messages me and he's like, hey, I got this really cool one. It's really pretty. It's amazing. He's like, I don't know. I think this one's worth a lot of money. Because now I'm like, okay, now he's going online and searching what he has.
Yeah.
He's like, this thing's amazing. He's like, this thing is so beautiful. It's probably worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And I'm like, okay, fuck, what does he got? Sends me a picture. It's a regular green iguana.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh man, yeah, beautiful. I mean, it was a beautiful animal, but little does he know that's a super common animal here.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking 2016, so they were still legal in Florida. And I was like, no, man, I'm okay. I have a lot of lizards now. And then he had since quit from that job. But yeah, that was one story
amazing.
of it's a crazy story. Crazy story.
So
All I
crazy.
need is to find a guy who gets in shipments from Fiji, and then just wait, and it'll happen. I'll get
now that one. I have a feeling that might get intercepted.
It might.
People find out you have that, then that might be a little different situation.
Well, I'll tell you what. If I had a Fiji, if I ever got one, I wouldn't show anybody. I mean, obviously, but I mean, it'd be hard not to. But I'll tell you what. If it was a matter of like, if I ever had one and it was like a secret or whatever, and in order to keep it, I had to keep it secret or something, I would keep it totally secret.
Oh yeah, me too.
I don't know what it was. Just for me, it was just for seeing a Fiji in some book when I was a little kid, just some picture of an iguana, and I was just like, good Christ, I don't know what that is, but I want one of those,
the emerald green. You got the emerald green background with the aqua blue stripes and thick stripings.
Something about
love that thick banding.
Yeah. And something about the face, the proportions, the angles of that face, just something, and specifically with the Fiji crested iguana. I can't. There's just something about him. I can't quite put my finger on it. It just gets me. It hit me at the right time, in the right place, when I was the right age to be totally impressionable and not give a shit about anything else. And everybody's got their thing. I would have a Komodo, or I would have a spider-tailed viper from an Iranian spider-tailed viper or something. It's like, yeah, that's fine. You do you get whatever. Well, maybe don't get a Komodo, but I don't care what you're into. But for some reason, for me, the Fiji just got me. And I still can remember the picture. It was it must have been of someone in Europe or Canada that had one in captivity, because it was some captive enclosure, and whoever was feeding it was hand feeding it a hibiscus flower. And I was like, what the fuck? I need that.
And it's kind of dumb that we can't have them, because pretty much I think every country, with the exception of the US, can have them, because I'm pretty sure I've seen them in most keepers' hands.
Yeah.
I don't know, Roy. How are they in the
UK? Nice, dude. I knew it. Dude, that's gonna go forever. Like, my mistake of thinking Roy was in the UK is the gift that
I love it, man. I love it. Really, and again, like I told you earlier, had I not spoken to him on the phone like 3 months prior to you saying that, I would have been like, hell yeah, he's from UK, probably. I don't know. You say it, okay, I believe you.
My favorite thing about that is like Eddie messages me before I listen to the podcast. He messages me. He's like, "Have you listened to the latest one yet?" And I was like, "Not yet. I'm going to." And he just replies with a Union Jack emoji, and I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like,
I didn't tell him anything else.
And he like sent me the wrong emoji. Like, what's this all about? I had no idea what was going on. And then after I listened to it, I'm like dying laughing over here. Like, can't catch.
And it's funny because if you watch,
I'm sure
that video's still out, because it was a video podcast too.
Yeah.
You just see the look of confusion on my face when Phil says that, and I'm like,
gotta look that up.
And it's funny because in that particular podcast, I was more quiet, so I'm just listening to everybody, and then Phil says what he says, and you just see my face like, the fuck?
Yeah, I remember that.
No, you're like, no, I spoke to him like last week.
Yeah, I was like, I was talking to him, and he sounded pretty American to me.
Yeah, God. Well, and I was like, and I remember, because I think I remember commenting on it, like, I think seeing your look of quizzical face or whatever, I was like, I must be wrong. He's not, is he? And I just knew, just from the look.
No, you were like, yeah, he is. I was like, no, man, he's not. He's like, you sure? I'm like, yeah.
I mean, the thing is, it was everything. It was it was the level of keeping he was doing. It was the time I was doing his logo.
It's a compliment. It's a compliment.
It is a super compliment. Yeah, and he was.
I was never offended.
I feel like, well, yeah, I know. And I mean, just thankfully. But I'm just saying, it was one of those things where, and even like the time slot when you would get back to my messages, I feel like indicated to me, because it was like overnight. So I was like, he's got to be over. He has to be, you know.
Nice.
God damn it, that's hilarious.
What was
I
even
love it.
funnier though too is that you guys were then also talking about trailer park folks in that same one. And Ron's like, you better hope Roy didn't grow up in a trailer park. And I did grow up in a trailer park. So it was like a double whammy. I was like, oh my God, I'm never gonna let this go. I gotta
But again, that's kind of like
your
how we met story.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's perfect.
I like it.
Yeah, it's a real bromance.
Now this happens.
You'll be telling your future children
right.
Story happened.
That's true. How did you meet Roy?
And it's funny because it's cool because I know you both separately. So Phil, I knew you because we did the podcast together. Obviously, I followed you before that, but I didn't actually know you until we did the podcast. And Roy, I followed him for a couple of years before I actually started speaking to him and messaging him, and we would message back and forth because we did similar lizards.
Yeah.
So we chatted all the time, and then I knew you guys separately. So seeing this is actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's such an intriguing way that we ended up kind of clicking too, because not just in terms of our perspective on a lot of concepts about herpeticulture broadly, but also just in terms of other random worldview stuff. Like Roy, he recently sent me a book that I'm absolutely obsessed with, and it's like we really do click on a lot of levels in terms of friendship, which is it's really awesome. But it also, like, it's the same thing with Eddie, you and Ron in Florida. I'm like, why the fuck is everybody in a different state? Like, all the people who I want to be friends with are somewhere else, and
it's such a bummer.
The Colorado reptile scene is great. I'm not upset about it. I have some good friends here, my friend Nick Dokai and my friend Ryan McKnight, and a handful of other people who are here in Colorado who are great people. But it's, the expos, the camaraderie, it's just not the same here for various reasons. The types of people don't overlap the same way, and I guess, which is, we've joked a couple of times in doing the show that even starting the podcast is almost just an effort for me to have more friends, because I'm a very extroverted, social. I need a lot of interaction from people, and don't get me wrong, I've got lots of friends in jiu-jitsu, but in jiu-jitsu I'm the dude with reptiles, so they're like, he's like Tiger King, right? And I'm like, no, not quite, but and then in the art realm, he's that jiu-jitsu guy, he'll tie you in a pretzel. I'm like, no, not really, I'm just like a dude. And it's harder to find those overlaps where people's worldviews and the ways we have fun and the way we talk about enjoying what we do and why we do it. It's harder to find those overlaps, and it sucks when you're like, some of those people are like 2.5 hours away by time zone, and 4 hours by flight or whatever. It's just like, and speaking of the UK, also, just for the record, I know you can have Fijis in the UK, because I had this conversation with another friend of mine.
There you go, Roy, get him.
Yeah, you could get him. I mean, there's so many animals I would love to keep that we just can't. Maybe I'll have to just move to some country with no extradition policies and be able to just keep whatever the hell I want. Let's do that. You guys want to just move somewhere and form a compound, and we'll all have.
So it's kind of where my mind was going.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that sucks. I love living in Florida. I love the warm climate. I hate the cold. I'm a skinny Chihuahua. I don't like anything below 78 degrees. I shiver. I'm not meant for that world. I'm not about that life. This is the perfect climate for what I do as well.
Yeah.
And the thing that sucks about it is like all the legislation that's going on. And I'm never moving. Like, I can never tell any family member, hey, we're moving because I need to breed lizards. They tell me to go fuck off.
Yeah.
But it just sucks, man, because I love living here, but it's getting harder to live here depending on like what species that you do. I can never tell my family we're moving because I need to breed, a lizard.
Yeah.
That'd be insane.
Yeah, we just got so we have a governing body here in Colorado called PACFA that kind of regulates and inspects my facility every year and everything, which is fine. Happy to do that. That's not really a big deal to me, but they recently instituted something where they are doing this continuing education thing, and all their licensees are required to attend some of these continuing education courses. Now, I don't know what it looks like. I haven't looked into the exact details of exactly what the courses look like and how much. It's not going to be that much time. You know, it's not like some semester you have to take at a community college or something. But my knee-jerk reaction to that was like, you mean you guys are going to come to my place and get educated? You know what I mean? Because it's like, just for the record, none of you have any idea how to do what I do, and the idea that you guys would give me here's how you're going to do it. It's like, well, no, I'm not. And I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure it's harmless. I'm sure it's mostly about policies and helping educate their licensees about exactly how they want to see records kept and how they want to see, you know, just I'm sure it's mostly about their policies and less about the individual animals and how you keep them and things like that. But it is still quite infuriating. It can be, I can't even imagine what it's like dealing with what you guys have been dealing with in Florida in terms of having some of those rights revoked. And
I spent
so intense.
I've talked about this before, but I spent like over 10 grand on green iguana mutations.
Yeah,
like two years before 2 years before they decided to try to ban them.
My God.
Yeah.
So like that's money gone. That's a huge chunk of money gone.
Yeah.
And honestly, as soon as I found out like where that rule was going, I got rid of everything beforehand because I just saw the writing on the wall. I knew we were not going to win. Not that I was being negative. I just knew we were not going to win this. So I sold everything before that passed, and then lo and behold, it passed.
Yeah.
Can't have the green iguana. And it really sucks too, because I really wanted to breed that species. Obviously they're common species, but that was personally my first animal that I ever kept as a kid, as a 10-year-old kid. So for me to breed it, like captive breed that species, was like a goal.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of sucks, but
yeah.
Man.
So Roy and I actually talked a little bit about this on our launch show with Dylan. We were talking about the way that legislation and that sort of thing affects all of us and is something that all herpers need to kind of have on their radar and participate in and actively work against. But we also expressed some of our personal views. Like mine is that, like, look, if you want to keep something like a retic or a croc monitor or a black throat monitor or whatever, or a venomous, you should probably have some hoops to jump through, at least in my my personal opinion. But I'm curious where do you fall on the topic of why on like legislation, and if we should, and how it might be useful in terms of institutionalizing that kind of change and stuff? What do you think?
No, I'm all for there being some sort of boundary for certain species. There's a lot of species that people have that I shrug my shoulders at, like, why do you have this? One example is the sulcata tortoise.
Yeah.
On Facebook, in Florida, you don't have, not even reptile people, but the amount of posts I see of people finding a random sulcata just walking around.
Yeah.
Like, I found this tortoise and it's like 50 plus pounds. Like, it's daily and it's a different tortoise every time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be that opposed if there was some legislation on that species. I'm not saying you can't have them, but I just don't think everyone should have them, especially for $50 a piece for a little baby.
Yeah.
Also, like the large monitors, I do believe you should have the right to keep it. I do believe you have the right to keep any species.
Yeah.
However, I don't think that you could just get it. Just, you know what, today's the day I'm going to get a croc monitor, or today's the day I'm going to get this species. I do agree that there should be some sort of process in how to get that species.
Yeah.
Not everyone can supply them with, you know, as far as like the tortoises, an Aldabra or whatever. Not everyone has the access to provide them with an acre plus plot of land, you know,
Yeah.
and or the croc monitor.
Yeah.
How many people can build what Ron built? Not too many people. Or what you were saying with Armin, the indoor enclosure that he built. I
Yeah.
saw that. I mean, how many people can do that?
Yeah.
Not many people. So it's a slippery slope, you know. I don't want them to take away the right. I believe you have the right to do it, but there should be a process in order, in order that you can get them.
I mean, it's like you can't
reasonable to me.
Sorry, Roy. I didn't mean to cut you off, buddy. Go ahead.
No, I just said that sounds reasonable to me. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, it's like you can't go buy a horse and then just put it in your backyard. You know, like you've got to have, or like if you live in an apartment and you get a Great Dane or a Saint Bernard or something, or an Irish Wolfhound, people are going to knock on your door and be like, "Hey, buddy," you know what I'm saying? And it's like, you know, I don't know how to, because I agree with that too, Eddie. I feel like there really is like a fundamental right. Like I should be able to have a damn Fiji iguana. Damn it, because I said so, you know. But and this is something I mentioned on the show with Dylan, but I want to reiterate here. But I also feel like so much of our argument as a community basically just sounds like "don't tread on me." And it's like, look, I get it. I'm all here for that argument, but it just feels really insufficient. It doesn't feel like enough. It's like, yeah, don't tread on me, but here's why you shouldn't tread on me. And like, unfortunately, there are so many examples of obviously what you mentioned with the sulcatas. I mean, several years ago, someone sent me a photograph of a wild croc monitor running wild out in some desert somewhere. Like, you know, the same thing is true of cats, right? Like I have cats. I have 2 cats, and they never go the fuck outside unless they're on a leash. And you know, but nobody's talking about how irresponsible cat owners are. Maybe in Australia they're talking about it because maybe Australia seems to have a little bit.
They're the only ones doing it right.
Yeah, right. Like
I have a story about a cat.
Tell me.
We had this indoor cat for years.
Yeah.
It lived in this house. Well, not this house, but it lived in the house that we at the time for 10 plus years, entire life. Never went outdoors in its entire life. One day we left the door open or something happened where it was actually able to like escape.
Yeah.
And the very first day number 1, not even an hour, I see this cat. And it's funny too, because it was like a whole like surreal story. So my neighbor is painting his house. So he's outside. And I go outside because I can't find my cat. I see the cat, it's a black cat. So I see him and he's like crouching. And I'm like, what the hell is this? What is he doing? So I'm looking at the cat. My neighbor's looking at me like I'm a weirdo. I'm looking at the cat like he's a weirdo. Then out of nowhere, the cat pounces and grabs a fucking mourning dove.
Oh.
Like by the neck, just grabs it. And I'm like, what the hell? Again, never has stepped on grass in its entire life. Never seen anything other than a dog.
Yeah.
You know, that was the other animal that's seen him. The first thing it did was grab its neck, catch it, first go. Overweight cat, probably ate too much, caught this damn thing. And I'm like, what the hell? So I'm like shaking the bird out of its mouth. The bird like finally lets go, or the cat lets go. The bird flies away through the lake, like it passes the lake. Apparently there was a hawk watching this whole thing go down on my neighbor's roof. The hawk makes a beeline, catches the bird, and then just flies away. My neighbor looks at me and goes, no one's going to believe you. as I'm holding the cat, my neighbor, he says that to me. And I'm like, son of a bitch, he's right.
Right.
But that goes to show, but that goes to show you that cat was spoiled its entire life.
Yeah.
Indoors for 10 plus years. And the first moment it stepped outside, it was able to almost kill a wild animal.
Right.
So
yeah,
I don't know where I was going with that story, but
that's a great
it
story.
just reminded me of that story.
Great story.
Yeah, damn, that's great. Yeah, I mean, and I always, it's one of those things where I've had other people ask me, it's like, well, why, you know, why do you got to keep that? Or why do you want to keep that? It's like, well, why do you want to keep a dog or a cat
Yeah.
or a horse or a parrot or a guinea pig or a gerbil or any other, a fucking beta? You know what I mean? Like, why? Oh, wow, that's different. I'm like, it's not different, you fuck. It's exactly the same. There is absolutely no difference, you know? And yeah, I don't know. I'm still kind of trying to formulate in my own head, like what a good like what it would look like how one or how any institution would regulate or what have you, something like a croc monitor or a retic or a berm or any of the large and semi, you know, dangerous species that we're talking about. It's like, because I also, you know, I understand, I don't want a tiger, you know, when are we going to find out that a tiger escaped or not? Well, it's a bad example because that's already happened, right? But like, when are we going to find out that some retic or whatever escaped, or a venomous escaped their facility and killed somebody? Or, you know, like we used to, I've told this story actually back on the podcast, Eddie, we did with Ron and Paul. There was a reptile shop here in Colorado that used to let a massive black throat monitor roam the store. Like, okay, this black throat monitor happened to be chill, really cool. But I remember watching a little kid with a diaper on walk up to the lizard and pet it and walk away. Nobody saw. No one, the parents, the people running the store, nobody paid the fuck attention. And I'm like, dude, your kid's dead. Your kid's fucking dead if that thing decides to just change its mind for 5 seconds. Not even. If an iguana, like a green iguana, an Egyptian Euromastix, dude, they change their mind, your kid's in the hospital, you know? And the same is true of a dog or a cat, you know?
Yep.
We hear all the time about dogs attacking kids or a cat attacking a kid. There's that funny video of that dude getting psyched opening his presents on Christmas and the cat latches on. I love that video. Hilarious, dude. And it
almost looked planned.
Yes, I know, dude, because he was freaking out and the cat was so pissed. And I was like, oh God, I love that. But anyway, I digress. But it's challenging when we see that stuff, and it's like, I feel like sometimes we're the only option we have to combat that is just to share more cool. I mean, I don't, but I also don't want to share pictures of like, I don't feel comfortable with somebody sharing pictures of them cuddling with their lizard either, like wrapping it up in a blanket, going to bed and having a bearded dragon nap with them right here. I'm like, I'm not into that either. You know, I don't know.
No, I get hundreds of pictures of people sending me those pictures, like those type of pictures of animals that I've sold them. And I'm just like, oh, cool. You love it.
Great.
You love it.
You know,
and you know, the animal looks, the animal is well cared for. So that's all I care about. But
oh man,
I'm not, you know, I'm not doing that with all my lizards or any of my lizards.
I got one. I'm sorry, Roy, but I got one more quick story kind of on this topic before we move on to more some more questions. So I sold two Euromastics to a customer years ago, and she was Asian, and I don't know where she was from, but she didn't speak English very well. And she at one point sends me a question saying, hey, you know, do you know if bath beads are dangerous for Euromastics, basically? And I'm like, what? And she was like, oh yeah, I've been bathing my Euros every day since I got them from you. And I just noticed that the stuff I've been using has bath beads in it. And I'm like, what? Why? In what universe would you do this and why? And the craziest thing is she sent me pictures of the animal. Dude, one of the nicest ornates I've ever seen in my life. like so beautiful. Spick and span, the cleanest thing, was getting lotioned every day. Like beautiful ornate, look better than half of the ones here. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here, right?
You've been doing it all wrong, Phil.
I've been doing it all wrong. Bath beads.
Put it in your next care sheet.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you heard it here first. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in
your next YouTube video.
Fuck, man.
Oh my god.
That's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. But okay, so
Wait, I
getting
got a question for both of you guys though.
oh shit,
So
okay.
you guys both recently moved, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Roy, I think you're still in the process of moving, or you're done.
Yep. I'm still in the process. Yeah.
Okay. How has that been for you guys with your animals?
Oh, I could say from this move, it hasn't had it. It's the animals have stayed in place. So I've the last
Okay.
time I moved the animals was 3 years ago when I moved them out of my family's home into the facility that I'm in now. And I'm dreading the day when I ever have to move them again. So I can't speak to that. That was one of the most awful experiences of my life. It was terrible, but
Yeah.
Honestly, this one has gone really well, I think. I mean, it's always moving, it's stressful, you know, in so many ways. I'm sure it was stressful for the animals. The worst part about it was the spilotes, the sulfurious, the big puffing snakes. It took about 2.5 days to get their vivarium taken down and then put back up, which is like that was moving at warp speed pretty much considering what that involves with that vivarium. So they were in tubs for 2.5 days, but the females both laid. Subsequent to that, they were already gravid when that was happening,
Nice.
and it went well. I think the big thing I'm interested to see though is if the Polycris go this year or not, if they breed, because you know, I had 2 years in a row with them, no problems, and I'm just curious if the disruption of being moved this year will throw them off and maybe they won't go. But honestly, if that was the case, I would be fine with that. You know, give the females a year off, and I've got plenty on my plate as it is. But I think that it's been remarkably gentle, because I hear horror stories about people moving and then it's like wiping the slate, you know. And like I've been really lucky. I mean, my
Yeah.
tricolor hogs have continued laying eggs every 5 weeks like they do, which those things will do that
That's awesome.
on the surface of Mars probably, but
On a
but
side
they're
note,
still going.
that's another snake species that I would actually keep. For all the
They're
people
really
that
cool.
think I hate snakes, but no, I love snakes, and I would keep that species.
They're really cool.
Now, I will
But
say that me moving was one of the worst experiences I had as far as a reptile keeper, because not only am I moving my animals, but I'm also moving a family
yeah,
that aren't animal people. I mean, they're animal people, but they're not like in this industry. They're not in this world that I'm in.
yeah,
So, man, I do things outside too. So that was another thing that was, that sucked for me. But it took until almost 2 years later for me to actually rebound successfully. I've had this year has been like my best breeding year I've ever had as far as like production and the quality that I'm producing and the
awesome.
variety that I'm producing. But when I first moved here, I had no predators in my first house, zero. This one, I had like a pond behind my house with a little forest, and then the neighbors were feeding wild cats, feral cats. So
Oh
the
man.
first night, testing things, just keeping things outside, I got ransacked by raccoons. It was bad.
Oh
In fact,
man.
my entire conehead collection was dwindled to just one animal. And that's an animal that I was breeding successfully every year since 2016.
Oh,
I moved here in 2020, and currently I only have just one pair. And actually, I only had one animal. I had to loan a male from Ron and Heather to hopefully rebound from that. But yeah, raccoon just ripped open everything, took them all out, destroyed everything. My tortoises were like, where the hell are we? It took them a good year and a half to actually relax and finally lay eggs. I mean, for almost 6 months straight, they just walked the perimeter of their enclosure, and their enclosure was like 4 times bigger. And they were just out of their zone. everything was upgraded because I'm in a much larger property. But yeah, the tortoises didn't rebound. They took them forever. Again, the Aldabra was grumpy no matter what I did, so he was okay. Cone heads, and another thing, everything was gravid too. So in the middle of that move, everything was gravid. Now, keep in mind, I'm focusing on moving a family, a baby, like all of that, plus animals. So I did it the wrong way. I should have did a game plan. I didn't plan anything at all. And one of the cool things, not really cool things, but it's actually a tragic thing, but I had a female conehead. She was gravid, and that whole process, she retained her eggs. She was egg bound. She looked terrible. She looked absolutely terrible. And I set up an appointment at a vet to basically, see what's going on. Can we extract these eggs from her? And literally, as soon as I made that appointment, she had passed away, like right there and then. She passed away. No, I think it was like the next day she passed away. And I acted quick. I'm pretty sure I told the story before. I acted super quick. I found, and again, this is while we're unpacking to the new house. So like all my tools, everything that I use as far as like sterilization, couldn't find it. I used a regular kitchen knife. I opened this animal up, pulled the eggs out, and they actually survived. This was like this was like day 2 of moving into this house. So this is before raccoons. This is before I knew I had an enemy. So in my head, I'm like, okay, I still have more. Like I have a huge group of these guys. Like it sucks, but I will rebound as far as this project, as far as the species go. So she laid like 7 eggs, 4 molded out right away, but the 3 of them actually successfully hatched.
Wow.
And my dumbass, I sold them all, all of them right away. I sold them like immediately, but because I didn't know what the other tragedy was going to happen. So yeah, that was terrible. And then also like figuring out how this place works, like the sun and like what direction the sun's at, and all of that everything was just different. It was terrible.
But isn't outdoor keeping? It's just easier, right? Outdoor keeping is so easy, Eddie.
Everyone says that.
You don't even have to do anything.
It frustrates me so much.
I mean,
outdoor keeping, I would say is harder because here's how you got to look at it. My indoor stuff, everything that I have in my reptile building, that's the easy stuff. You know why? Because I control where the sun is, the light. I control the watering. I control everything about their setup, their environment, down to the little detail. Outside, I have no control of the sun. I have no control of the temperatures. I have no control of the overall elements and predators. I have no control of any of this stuff.
Yeah, so local resistance fighters.
just because climates are similar for a species and they're in Florida and you breed them doesn't mean like, oh, you didn't do anything. No, I break my back making sure these things are living a good life, getting everything they need, and can successfully breed. I hear a lot of other people making fun of, oh, you successfully bred it outside. You didn't do anything. No. You should see the work that not only me, but everyone else who keeps outdoor animals. There's only one animal that I breed that literally there's no effort to, and that's the Australian water dragon. That's the only animal that there's 0 effort into. But every other animal is literally, it's figuring out how they like it in that particular spot of my yard.
Right.
And again, a lot of people don't realize that. So
sorry, Roy. I thought you were.
No, go ahead.
Oh, my bad. It's I feel like I've actually made that mistake in my past. I remember a time when I remember kind of making a comment or thinking something along those lines, and it wasn't until I visited a couple of places where guys were doing stuff outside, and I was like, oh shit, like this is a nightmare. Like I have it so easier, like I just the like I've thought a couple times about moving to a climate more amicable to Euros and then just doing them outside. And really at the end of the day, okay, I'll save money, right? Because I'm not amping up heat lights all day, but fuck, man, from natural weather or from weather and natural disaster stuff, predators, ants, parasites. I mean, just fuck that. Just screw
Mhm.
it. Like I'm a coward. I don't want to do it. I don't even want to bother.
Yeah, and there's few species here that I have that are more arid.
Yeah.
So manipulating them to completely cycle the year and successfully produce. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a challenge getting that environment set up for them, like Lacerdas and the
Right.
dragons. You know, you're taking the animal that's more of an arid animal, not necessarily desert, but more of an arid climate, and you're manipulating their environment to make everything suitable for that species.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't see that. They just think you just throw it outside and you're done.
Yeah. So what are some of what are
It's
the,
not
what
that simple.
sorry, Roy, my bad. So what are some of the things that you have to do to, like, if you're trying to take something that's slightly more arid climate dwelling and keep it outdoors in Florida? What are some of the mitigating strategies you have to?
So I'll give you a perfect example. So like the jewel lacerdas or any lacerda species, years ago, like 10 plus years ago, I had lacerdas back when they were like really common. I tried to put them outside, and the particular property I was living at the time was more of like it's a homeowners association, so all the houses are really close by, so the humidity was higher in that environment, and I was getting like they were getting these sores, these respiratory sores all over them, and once they get just one, they're pretty much just done. Um, so and again, I was like in my early 20s at the time. So now visiting a few facilities and looking at places like Ron's place and seeing how they're doing it with like the dragons and some other stuff. So with a lot of that more drier climate species, every cage is lifted, because where I live, it's still a little bit saturated as far as like rain and just overall water. So everything's lifted about 8 inches to a foot, depending on the species and depending on where they are in my yard, because there's different little microclimates in my yard. So like the jewel lacerdas are about maybe a foot off of the ground. It can rain, and if water does go in it, it completely drains out. There's no thick substrate that they can get into that will saturate. It's sand and rock. So water can go in there, but it completely dries out super quick. And then there's an area where it's bone dry, like completely bone dry from them. There's no light, there's no rain can't get into it, so they can always hide in there. And I also, again, visiting other places, I use a lot of the greenhouse heavy duty plastic. I'll use that as well, but also keep it ventilated so it's not getting stagnant in the actual environment. So simple things like that to help manipulate it. It works, but not everyone can do it, because again, I tell people all the time, like Ron and Heather live 20 minutes away from me, but I can't do the things that they do. Like for instance, it will storm in my yard and I'll call Heather and it's bone dry over there. Like they live in it's strange. People think Florida's like one giant subtle temperature. It's not. It's different. So I can't do everything that they do, and if I do, I have to manipulate it differently. So yeah, everything's lifted. Water can completely drain out. I have the what is it called? It's the thick, like the hard plastic, not the sheet, but the what's it called? The carbonated greenhouse plastic.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it's still, but I can still, on the side, everything is ventilated, but on top, water can't get into it. And so far, I've successfully bred the Lacerda. This was my first year doing the Lacerdas outside for over a year, and they completely cycled. I didn't do, when it was time for brumation, they were set, they were good. If it rains too much, they're usually at the very end of their setup where it's bone dry. So it's little things like that where you have to like figure it out. Unfortunately, there may be some trial and error, but so far so good. I'm doing the Rankins dragons outside in a similar situation, and I think I'm doing good because they won't stop laying eggs.
That's great.
I'm like, stop laying eggs for me, and they just keep going.
Yeah. That's great, man.
But again, every yard is different. Every property is different. I can't do the same thing that other people, like my neighbor 3 doors down, can't do the same stuff that I'm doing.
Right.
or the same way that he can't do it the same way that I'm doing it, I should say.
Weren't you, it was you, right? Who, didn't you use a tackle box for those Lacertas to nest in? Is that you? That was,
Yeah.
that's a brilliant idea. That was,
Yeah.
that dimension of a lot of tackle boxes is like perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually
true.
looking for more of those, and that was all coincidence. So I built their enclosure,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and I'm looking at the female, and I'm like looking at her, and I'm like, okay, I visually see him breed her, and I'm like, all right, I didn't think this was going to happen that fast.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, they have substrate, but I make it where it's less than an inch, so that way they know not to dig. Because I want every animal. Again, I'm a breeder, so I do things a lot differently than other people. So I need to find eggs. I don't let things just lay where they want to lay. I need them to lay where I can find them right away, so I can get the eggs, and then I can move on. Because I am a very busy guy with a lot of animals to take care of.
Right.
So I had this toolbox. It didn't even belong to me. I borrowed it from my uncle. And I had, because again, I just moved into this place, so I had this toolbox, and I'm like, you know what? And in my head, I'm like, this would be kind of perfect. Let me mess with this. So I cut the hole in the middle. I filled it with substrate up to the brim of the first level, and they went into it right away. It worked out. It fit perfectly. Like it looked like I built it for it. And all I got to do is just lift open the lid and just collect eggs.
Right.
And they recognize it. They use it right away. It was literally something that I just saw and just did right away.
Wow.
And now I'm looking, and the toolbox was like 30 plus years, and I can't find it. So I'm looking for the same one. But yeah, but it was all coincidence.
That's awesome. That's way too cool.
And both the male and females, they'll use it. They'll just burrow into it when they want to. Because I do provide them, like it is humid for the eggs. So just because they're arid, doesn't mean they're just dry 24/7. So both male and female will go in there just to get some moisture. But yeah, no, and again, I spray when necessary. But
sure, that's excellent. So Roy, I've just been, again, I know I've been per usual, just kind of monopolizing the questions and the conversation. So I want to give you some time to get in some stuff before I answer, or before I ask a few that I still have kind of in the can.
Yeah.
Let's go, Roy.
Let's see, what do I want to lay on you right now, Eddie? Well, now I'm all I'm thinking about is just outdoor keeping stuff. But
cool too.
Yeah, I feel like I think that let's actually pivot. Let's go with the new questions, and
okay.
I'll tag in from there. But
okay, sounds good. That sounds good. So I have two questions that are related to one another. So who are some of the folks inside herpeticulture that you were either inspired or motivated or influenced by the most? And then is there anybody that you pay attention to outside of herpeticulture that gives you motivation, whether it's motivation to do more work, or whether it's maybe it's some koi farmer somewhere who just just crushes it with something. That could be applicable as well.
Okay, so it's actually an easy question for me. So first person right off the bat is a ball python breeder, old school ball python breeder. His name is Ralph Davis.
Oh yeah.
He was the first person that I saw. He was the first person to open my eyes that this was an actual industry, and that you can actually make a living doing this.
Yeah.
And that all happened because I had a ball python, and someone else gave me another ball python, and they bred, and I was like, okay, what next? So I researched, and I found this weird world of I just thought I was a strange guy that did this. I didn't know that other people did this.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I didn't know where all these animals came from. I should have known better. But seeing how successful he was as a breeder, I was like, he's doing what he loves, and he's actually making a living. I'm not saying he's a millionaire or anything. He's making a living for himself.
Sure.
So I basically took that to what I liked as far as like different species, because I didn't want to breed the ball pythons. So he was number one, and then number two has to be Ron.
Yeah.
just seeing the things that he comes up with in his head, again, manipulating his enclosures for the particular animal. And that inspires me. So if you look at my collection, it's like a mini version of like how he has everything set up, or like how it's suited to fit my needs. So he's talking to me, but I'm like looking at everything he's doing and every little detail I'm watching and why he's doing it. And I take it home and I do the same thing. Again, it fits my needs. So he was one of the first people that I looked at as far as taking an animal that Florida's out of its element, but he's making it successful outdoors in Florida. So that was, obviously the second one. And then, he became actually one of my closest friends I have in this industry. So that was cool. What was the other part of the question?
The second part was about people who are outside of herpeticulture that either motivate or inspire you with, it could even just be like, you just like watching this dude's workout videos and you get jacked for the day. That's fine too. But anything really.
Yeah. So I'm probably stealing this again from Ron, but I believe this probably way before I even knew Ron. The tropical fish world.
Yeah.
Watching the breeders, because I used to breed fish too. Seeing their setups and how more defined and refined they are, and how clean and just the different overall processes of what they do, that inspired me. So yeah, they can make it look like a breeding operation, but at the same time, they can also make it look visually satisfying. I really enjoy that. Yeah. A lot of the fish breeders in Asia, those guys are just doing crazy stuff. Whether it's like different species of like cichlids or angelfish, or even like the freshwater rays.
Yes.
I look at that, and my fish days are way gone. Like I have no desire. I mean, I would one day, but as currently, I have no desire to do any of that stuff. But that industry I look at, and I'm like, okay, these guys are really, they're way light years ahead of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that question, kind of framing the next question, and it's also kind of a two-part question, but are there any like blind spots that you think herpeticulture has broadly, or maybe a lot of people in herpeticulture might have? And then sort of the follow-up or the intertwined in that is, are there any like gripes or what would be some of like the top criticisms you have of herpeticulture broadly?
So I'll answer the second part first. So the gripes I have, and I have to fault myself because sometimes I do it, is the gatekeeping. And again, I am guilty of this as well, because sometimes people ask me questions and I'm like, I don't know. I have no clue.
What's a lizard? What do you mean?
Yeah, I just throw them outside and they make babies.
Hey.
But yeah, that's one. Because when I was younger, back when the internet was still somewhat new in people's households, I would go on like the forums. Back in the dial-up days, I would go on forums and I would ask questions as a kid, and I would get destroyed by obviously like older people, like basically telling me to fuck off, and then my whatever I was doing would crash. So, and if you look at other industries, again, the fish world, they're way open about it. They don't care. They may be quiet about a project they're doing, but the overall care of a species, they're an open book.
Yeah.
And I think with us, we're a little bit more quiet. Again, there's a lot of species that I know that people have worked with, that I'm currently working with, that won't talk to me on how to do it.
Crazy.
That kind of sucks. But again, I can't say anything because I've done it in the past. I did it like yesterday. But what was the first part again?
Blind spots.
Like what we're lacking or what we're not seeing.
Yeah, like maybe
in our industry.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I know it's like maybe there's a lot of meat to that question, but sometimes I just wonder about it. There's all these. You can't create art in a vacuum, and something I've said a few times is that like herpeticulture is at least I think is a fairly artistic pursuit. There's a lot of art and creativity involved in doing what we do, and I feel like all of us take those of us who are really doing this at a certain level where we take it super seriously and we're hyper dedicated and whatever, I feel like all of those folks are paying attention outside, like you said, to the freshwater fish, to freshwater rays, to like I think of Jordan Russell and how he's involved in aviculture with all the different birds that he's doing, and really, I hope that's the right term, but I think it's aviculture. But
I haven't heard his name in forever. Holy crap!
Yeah, and it's just a lot of, there's a lot of people who, some of the people who seem to be on the more cutting edge, you could say, seem like they're paying attention to a lot of different industries, not just herpeticulture. And, I wonder about it because, I mean, I feel like that's one of the things we want to do with the show is we want to have, right now we're focusing on getting a lot of herpers on the show to build up kind of a library, but, we want to speak with aquaculturists. We want to speak with people who are raising insects for the pet trade and fishing. We want to speak with, I would love to get, man, there's a lot of guys like, I haven't said this anywhere specifically, but I would love to talk with Thomas Price. He's obviously in herpeticulture, but I'd love to have a conversation with that guy and find out what's going on in his mind. And just other, and I don't know. I'm just curious if there's anything that stands out to you that's like, fish keepers think about this. I don't know any herpers that think about this at all, or think about this type of thing, or maybe it's a little meaty and needs a little more forethought instead of just some spontaneous question that I throw at you, but just in case.
As far as a blind spot and what you were saying, I think a lot of reptiles, or a lot of people in our industry that are working with the reptiles, they do one thing and it works, and that's it. They're sufficient, and they'll do it for like their whole life. Not realizing what that animal actually wants. A reptile, for the most part, is not really an emotional animal. It's not letting you know, hey, I don't like this, I don't want this, I like this. They're not doing that. So you have to like sit there and watch it. And a lot of these animals, they'll thrive in these conditions their whole lives, and you wouldn't know. But then you put them in a different situation and you're seeing all these different experiences, you're seeing different cues and reactions, and I think about all the time. I remember again moving here and watching my yard. I always thought like the green anoles were one way, and now I watch the cycle of how they live in my yard. So I have a cherry tree. This is probably a complete crazy tangent, but so I have a cherry tree
going,
and it's this weird cycle in my yard. So I have a cherry tree. The birds come to the cherry tree. They stick their beak in the cherry, make a little hole. They take what they need from the cherry, and then they fly away. Then the anoles come later, and they stick their nose in the hole that the bird made, and they lap up what they want from the cherry, which is, and it's crazy. And I never would have thought they would have done this. And then so the green anoles are in the tree. The brown anoles are on the bottom, on the floor, eating what's on the floor of the cherry tree.
Yeah.
And it like messes me up because for years I always thought like this animal loves insects and that's all they eat, and not knowing that these things go ape shit for fruit.
Yeah.
And I'm
but
literally
also they
witnessing
can't
this in
access
my
it
yard.
without the birds.
So in my yard, they can't access it without the birds or without it rotting out. So the brown anoles are actually eating what's rotted out on the floor. And if you walk by my cherry tree, the brown anoles run away from the base of the tree. When you actually go up front, the green anoles, they have like a different movement, so they'll actually kind of stay still, and then you actually have to focus on them. But their face is like covered in red, and they're waiting for the birds to like finish, and then they'll go up to like the ripe cherry, and that messes me up. And I'm like, I had no clue. I mean, for years I've seen like other breeders give their anoles fruit, but I'm visually watching it technically in the wild in my yard. So I give everything cherries, and I see how they're interacting with it. So I breed the Allison anole, which is a very similar looking anole to like the green anole.
Beautiful.
And I take the cherry, I put a full cherry in there, and they will not mess with it. They'll lick it, but they can't do anything to it. They can't get any substances from it, and they'll wait for it to start to rot. And then you start seeing them kind of like shove their face into it. So then I take it and I squeeze it and I put it in there. and now they're a little bit more tame around me. So now they come in front of me and they come out and they'll actually like take pieces of it and just rip it, shred it. They'll do little gator rolls and just rip pieces off of it. And
so cool.
Again, I'm visually seeing this in my yard with the wild stuff. And now I see it, and now I give everything cherries. So like the anoles are eating the cherries. The water dragons, I give them cherries. They disappear, but I've never seen them actually eat it. So who knows? So I don't know if that goes with enrichment or however you want to classify that, but it's just interesting to see the excitement of certain animals to different foods.
Yeah.
And again, had I not seen that from my own eyes, I would have given all my animals, all the anoles, just crickets, discoids, and the end. Now they have much of a varied diet. And again, I saw Ron do it, but I'm seeing it in my yard. I'm watching the excitement of these lizards. Literally 10 minutes after the birds fly away, they come, and they're doing that. And of course, they can live their whole life without ever doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just going outside the box and doing that. Like I got so many messages today when I posted that video. I didn't know they could do that. I didn't know either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, because you mentioned the gatekeeping, and that's something that I've seen in jujitsu gyms. Like if you think about it, and I'll tie this back to reptiles a little if I can, but if you think about it, if you wanted to start a martial art like jujitsu, it takes some fucking cojones, man, to like find a gym, go into a gym with all these alpha broed out dudes and say, I'm gonna wrestle with you guys, and be able to stick past that and like get through how uncomfortable it is and how weird it is and how different it is, and like everyone in the gym knows each other and they don't know you, and they may or may not include you, and there's all these barriers that are just naturally present because of what it takes to get there in the first place. And some of the most successful gyms I've seen and been a part of have made strong efforts to break those barriers down. Because if you mentioned getting picked on a little bit in the forums when you would post a question. I had that experience over and over again. And, like you posting somewhere, just a harmless, innocuous question, and someone will get on the question that you asked and just slam you for it and be like, you fucking idiot. How could you not have done any research to like pay attention? I'm like, bro, I'm trying to do that right now, and you're making me feel like an asshole for it. And how many people could have endured a little more and maybe could have been a big part of our industry who flaked out because enough people were assholes to them. Not everyone is as hard-headed as me or you or whatever, who is like, no, I'm going to do this even if you make fun of me for it. Like, I don't care. I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
And that's not everybody. That's not for everyone. And maybe in order to get someone with enough resilience to continue participating, maybe on day 5 in herpeticulture, it would have been enough to make them quit if someone hammered them on a forum. But on day 500, they'd have been like, who's this asshole? And would have kept going, Roy and I have mentioned this before on the show. There's no like education method if you want to become a herpeticulturist or something. There's no, you can't pick up a book on, well, I mean, obviously you can pick up lots of books on herpeticulture, but I just mean there's not like an introduction book that just says, here's what this is, here's what it's about, here's some of the history, here's some people you should know, here's some basics of keeping animals to consider. I mean, or at least if there's a book out there, I'm just not aware of it. And I feel like that's a really good one. I wouldn't have come to that had someone thrown me the same question. I really like that answer quite a lot. Yeah,
that's a good one.
I mean, it's easier now for someone because now they have Google.
Yeah,
I had a library that said iguanas, and then the cover had a bearded dragon on it. So
Sure.
Yeah, totally.
Sure.
Yeah, the internet. I mean, like I said, the internet came out when I was like in middle school. Like as far as it being a normal household thing, I was in middle school. So and then it took forever to load a page. So like you weren't getting anything at all. So I had no access to anything. So it was trial and error a lot for me. But people now kind of have no excuse to have some sort of information.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it's hard, I can't imagine like the trade secret thing, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
look, for the most part, other than a couple of projects that I'm working on here with the Euros that I'm just keeping to myself for the time being, because I'm, you know, or maybe it's something that I'm like brainstorming, right? Like a new feeding regimen, or a new, you know, like Eric was talking about, Connor made that great meme of him putting fake birds in the cage and making them spin around to scare the shit out of his animals, to get to kind of stressed because they're paying attention. They're so vigilant in the wild. Yeah, maybe it's a little, it's interesting. It's an outside the box thinking, but maybe experimental stuff. I'm not out there shouting from the rooftops, but I don't understand. I can't imagine trying to keep any of this secret, or there's no, I don't have some gem of info. If anything, it's the opposite. Like, the thing that I think everybody needs to do with Euros is just keep them damn solo, just house them alone, and everyone will do just fine. And people just ignore it. I mean, some people are doing better and housing stuff solo and getting a little more success, but it's taken a decade of me saying, keep your Euros by themselves. And then now people are starting to get at it and be like, okay, well, maybe I'll just do that because it's working better. But I can't.
It's funny that you say that, because I would have never, like, I never figured that ever. Obviously, I don't keep that species, but the amount of people I see that do the opposite of what you're doing, and what you're saying, is staggering.
Yeah.
And when you tell them, they always say the same thing. Oh, but they love each other, and they like each other, and
right. Well, and there's great examples of people like my good buddy Camille Hammers over in the Netherlands. He's a great friend of mine, really wonderful dude, and he doesn't do it that way. He houses animals in pairs. And now, granted, I know for a fact that he does stuff like splitting. He has open cages just year round, just to split animals off when they need it, because sometimes they bicker. And if anything, I love that idea. I'd love to be able to give my animals a little more interaction than surface level stuff, a little, you know, and I try to put them together throughout the year, so that way they're not, you know, just totally bored, you know, isolation type stuff. You know, I'll put them together and let them interact, but they always fight. They always bicker, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, so Cam does that too. And he's having great success. He has consistent breeding. They breed you know, he's hatching Euros every year. He does an awesome job. But you know, but he has 20 years experience keeping and breeding Euromastics specifically. And, you know, like the stuff that you need to look for when they're really being pissy with each other is lost on so many beginning and moderately experienced keepers. And so, yes, you're right. A lot of people just say, well, I've housed them together for years and it's not a problem. It's like, I'm not telling you that it's going to be a problem tomorrow, which it might be. Like, I've had Euros kill other Euros, just, you know, just literally just mutilate them to death. And it's like, okay, I don't want that. But most of the stuff that I'm talking about is the kind of thing, like, if you want a healthy animal that breeds for you as consistently as possible and lives to its fullest potential in captivity, you got to keep it by itself most of the time. Like, and I'm at the point now where I kind of feel like, for years I was kind of caveating that with like, look, there's lots of ways to do it, and there's other guys who are successful doing it differently than me. And I still think that's true, but I've changed my tune, and I've said, now I just say, no, Euros are best alone, period. Like, you're not going to give me another example of why they're not best alone, because I don't see that, and I'm more immersed than you are. And so unless you show me some data that says, here's why, you know, solo housing's not good, well, then I'm not gonna hear it, you know. But as a bit of a tangent myself, but you know, the trade secret thing just trips me out. I know I've heard stories of it from so many people in herpeticulture, how, oh, well, it's this one thing, you know, there's all these if you just do it this way, or it's one particular keeping method. And I'm like, man, how are you going to keep that a secret? It's not like the animal, or how to care for that animal, or where they come from. None of that's an absolute secret. Eventually, somebody's going to figure out, if you're not telling anybody, someone else out there is going to figure it out and tell everybody. And if we want more people keeping any given species, I'm going to give you every bit of information I can possibly think of. I'm not keeping shit secret at all.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just
I feel really
No, and
similarly about that. And I think that also it's like what is the benefit to the animals of keeping trade secrets,
Right.
right? There
Right.
is none.
Yeah.
Like basically it's people protecting like their quote unquote bottom line, you know, in this kind of scarcity mindset about things, knowing that other people are gonna like have to learn the hard way and fail, and like that's ultimately gonna mean animals are suffering and possibly dying in some cases. And like for me, I'm just like, no, that's not worth it. It's not worth it. And also like there's plenty of like if you're working with a species and there's demand, like there's demand, it's going to be all right. You
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
chances are you can give someone else your recipe and they're still not going to
Totally.
they might not still have the same amount of success, but maybe they'll keep their animals alive, you know, or maybe their animals won't suffer as much for it. And yeah, I feel like, you know, I've been really lucky in that like I've been able to reach out to guys like you two and Ron and be like, how do you do this stuff? Like when I first got the Polycris, I reached out to Ron and was like, listen, I've been keeping snakes. I haven't kept a lizard in a decade. What's your protocol just for lizards, just generally? You know, like,
Yeah.
can you give me like a paragraph? And he wrote back and was like, this is what we do generally. And I was like, thank you. That's all I need, you know? Um, like it's that like the whole community is stronger for that too, you know. Like not to even speak of like what it is for the animals and the ways in which they benefit, but I think also like, you know, we all benefit from that as well. And having relationships, having like kind of creating a culture of like mentorship within the hobby, I think that that's such an important thing. Bringing up the next generation so they're not just like repeating the same errors over and over again. There's so many errors, new, you know, beginner mistakes that happen constantly with reptiles that just they don't have to happen at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree
yeah,
more.
I agree.
Well, so we we covered so much great ground, man, and I really this is awesome. This has been a really good conversation. We have a kind of closing question that we ask each guest, and you know, kind of take it as broadly or specifically as you wish. But the question is, why herpeticulture? Like what are your justifications or your rationales for why we do what we do, why you do what you do? And again, that can be everything from because I fucking can get off my back to, well, it's actually it's very healthy for the microbiome. You know, I don't know any.
Yeah. So I probably have like a terrible answer for this. It's first off, I had no idea this was a thing that you could actually do.
Yeah.
I just thought I was that weird kid that did it by myself. I had no clue this was a thing until I got a little older. Second, it's more of like a God complex. Like this is the part. This is where I say it's going to sound terrible. So I enjoy setting up an environment, a little ecosystem for a species, and just watching that species do what it needs to do with the things that I've secured for it.
Yeah.
And then adjusting it accordingly. And I can sit down. I'm one of those weird people that can just sit down for hours, just watch a lizard do nothing. And then if it yawns or if it turns its head or laps up water, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that's amazing. And it all started like when I was a kid with fish, like watching this ecosystem of different species living together, interacting with each other. And I would just sit there for hours and everyone thought I was just weird. And like I would sit and just watch my tortoises for hours, just doing nothing.
Yeah.
And like I said, it would twitch its head or it would yawn, and that would be like the highlight of my day. So yeah, a little ego trip, but kind of a little God complex.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. The God complex is an interesting choice of words because I relate to that also. I think all of us who do this relate. There's really is something satisfying and rewarding and engaging about the practice itself, seeing small changes make big differences, seeing something that, you know, some there's an element of control, you know, in some way, like
Yeah.
maybe control. Yeah. So control, basically, like there's something about, I don't really have much control over much of the rest of my life. I mean, I have some level of agency and whatever, but
Yeah.
here, this is my domain for the most part. I mean, and again, I don't control everything here. Some of it's totally outside of my control, but for what's within it, it's really really rewarding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the outdoor area of my property, I really wanted to make it look like a place that I can just come and enjoy, and people who can just see what I'm doing. It looks satisfying for people who aren't even into reptiles.
Yeah.
So I'm slowly trying to make it kind of like a menagerie, I guess.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, adequate for these animals to successfully breed and just do everything they need to do. And then same thing with my indoor stuff. I eventually want to make that look very appealing as well. So hopefully soon I can make that happen for myself. So we'll see. But yeah, it sounds absolutely terrible, but God complex.
I don't think it sounds.
Oh man, I think I spoke to that a little bit in our first episode, just talking about like that, like I think it's that human impulse toward the adaptive management, I think is what I was calling it. But
yeah.
I think that's just like part of how we tick, you know, part of what makes us human is messing with the knobs and dials and seeing what works and what doesn't. And I can't really think of anything more gratifying than that in terms of like a process to be engaged in. And definitely relate to like the just sitting there watching a lizard for doing its thing for forever and being totally at peace and enjoyment, you know, of that. That's that's
like,
nice
yeah,
stuff.
like for instance, like when you set that camera up to watch the polycurus finally eat the fruit, you posted that video. Like, I can't imagine like how cool that would have been to like sit there and actually finally see it do it. You know,
I was so amped.
that would, yeah, that would freaking blow my mind.
You guys
Like,
can see
obviously
me out of the
you
frame,
see
just
fruit,
jumping up and down.
yeah, you see the fruit missing, but to visually actually sit there and actually see it happen, that's a whole different experience.
Yeah, that took a while.
Yeah. I bet.
Really brilliant. All right. Well, hey, I think that's probably the good time to close the conversation. Eddie, thank you again, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I know that, you know, 2.5 hours is not a small chunk of time for you, and we really appreciate it.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
close to that.
Yeah, 2.5 now. And I'm hoping hopefully we can have you on again in the future for any reason. We're hoping that not only because there's certain folks who we know have a lot to say and you know, all of that, but also there might be stuff that we forgot or, you know, maybe didn't like with Troy. We had Troy on. We didn't Troy Baumgartner from the Denver Zoo, and we didn't even ask him about the Fiji or the Komodos. We barely got into any of that, and we could have. And so it's like, all right, well, we gotta have you on again. So hopefully we can have you on.
That's probably the same for everybody. I mean, there's so much that I do here that that probably forgot to mention, species that nobody even knows I have. I just forgot.
Totally.
You're holding out on us, Eddie. We're gonna extract that good stuff.
And I've been known to like not be that social, so like, you know, not on purpose, but you know.
I know when we were doing that show with Paul and Ron, you were like the Roy of that.
I talk more than Roy today. I did
way more.
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
It's the whiskey.
A little quiet today.
Yeah. No, but I'm talking more. I have to.
It's great. Yeah. Well,
gotta keep my image up.
We like it. We like it when you talk, man. You got a lot of good stuff to say. I'm gonna stop the recording real quick.
Yep.